Good morning, Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. And boy, do we have a personality this morning. And interesting perspective.
Yes,
certainly.
We do that.
A job that very few of us could do it all, let alone do well, like our guest does. First, Cynthia, we, as you might remember, having been here a day or two, we always try to start the Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And I think we'll start right off this morning, Mrs. Busby, with your permission and your leave. I'd like to offer a kudo to our governor.
Yes.
Who showed up at Lincoln College last Saturday to award 325 graduates, I believe that's the correct number, their diplomas, and give us a very, very nice speech. The Gov rode up on his Harley, which was interesting. And, of course, that was a big to-do about that, naturally. And,
did he?
He's a big dude, you know.
Oh, yeah. Did he have bodyguards?
Yeah. Well, they have associates, you know. That they've got what I would call the state government version of Secret Service. I visited with some of the boys, and I said, "You boys packing?" They said, "Yeah, a little bit." So, what I really wanted to mention, in fact, not just the fact that the governor showed up, I gave the boys and girls of the graduates. Oh, some of them were not boys and girls. Some of them are seniors from up the normal campus. Anyway, a very, very good speech, short and to the mark, with not one political comment at all in it. But here's my kudo. You know, a lot of politicians in that position could come up and give their speech and then manage to disappear. Have other things to do and so forth. Our governor stood there and handshook every graduate as they came across the stage. And I thought that was a class act, to get up there with the college officials as folks came across and got their diplomas. As you know, fake diplomas, you know, all they get is the cover. Yeah. That's kind of the way that it is. But anyway, seriously, I thought that was a nice thing to do. And I told him I thought it was a class act, and I still think so. Yesterday, you know, was the another honor flight trip. And that brings to mind another kudo. On the last honor flight trip a couple of months ago, we had some mothers from up in Chicago, of all places, bring their youngsters down, and they were all dressed in little queen outfits with a tiara and the whole 9 yards. Now, they came down from Chicago to welcome these guys home. I thought that was remarkable, and I complimented this one youngster who was perhaps, 12, 13, and no more. And I told her how nice she looked and all, and so we had a few words of exchange. And bottom line is that we exchanged emails, and her older sister is working on a class assignment for high school. She's a junior in high school. And she has written me and asked by email, of course. That's the beautiful part of the internet and email. Some of these little personal things that happen, as opposed to all the junk that goes out there, telling how bad so-and-so is and how good so-and-so is.
Yeah, the social media.
But this 17-year-old youngster is doing a story on World War II veterans, and asked me quite an interesting list of questions. And I'm going to respond to that today and fill out the answers to her questions. So I'm going to just give a kudo to these folks. Clear up from Chicago, Illinois. Kristen, who is the older young girl, she's 17. Sophia, her youngster, her sister, and Edna Thompson. So,
and I'd like to piggyback on that. If you have never gone to Springfield to welcome the honor flight back, I highly recommend it. It is very moving. Everybody that's there is so friendly. You can talk to the guys and girls that went on the flight, and the stories are amazing. Yeah. They're amazing. So, they'll be doing another one in a couple months, and if you can go.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that. I've become very involved in that since I took the flight several years ago. So appreciative of the efforts that everybody made to make the flight so possible to start with, and then so enjoyable. So there are some of us from Logan County who have made it a point to stay involved in that. And by the way, quickly, another kudo. We have a local family, Aaron and Joyce Leisman, the son Adam. Adam has been involved in this intimately, going on all the flights, taking a big part of a responsibility. And Aaron and his wife Joyce are there every time, assisting those men who come, and ladies now, of course. There have been a few ladies go on that flight.
Didn't you work with her?
And so forth.
Yes, I worked with Joyce for several years.
Oh, did you?
At DCFS. She has subsequently retired, gone back to school, and now is a massage therapist.
Yeah.
You know, and it's actually kind of fun because I knew both of their children when they were little people, and it's so neat to look at Adam and how he has embraced the honor flight and how involved he is from this little boy you used to see running out of Family Video. You know.
Well, those folks who get themselves involved in that, by the way, I offered to be a guardian. As you know, each veteran has to have a guardian go with them. And I came back, I was so enthused, I offered to be a guardian. And they told me I was too old.
That was rude.
Well, the truth of the matter is, and I knew it and I accepted it right away, guardians have to be in a position to remove wheelchairs from buses and so forth. And
it's a
my back would not allow that.
Busy day.
Oh yeah, it's about, and it's interesting to watch the veterans come back. Some of them are really enthused still, it's a long day for them, as you suggested. And some of them are still full of vim and vigor, and some of them are pretty well pooped.
Well, that plus does it bring back a lot of memories.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's a lot of the servicemen and women who have seen things that we see on the big picture screen or we read in a book, and it pales.
Well, that's what I'm going to do in this questionnaire that this young lady from Chicago submitted to me. I'm going to try to flesh out the answers and kind of bring in some of the personal things that people experience. So that's going to be a challenge for the old fellow to make this interesting for her and usable.
It won't. No, it won't, Bill. And I'll tell you why. Aubrey, when she was in grade school, had an assignment to find a World War II veteran and ask some questions and write a paper. And obviously, it was like a one-page printed paper.
Sure.
And she still remembers that, and asking the questions and making it real, not just another page in the history book.
Yes, you know, there's a difference. When we were youngsters, and we'll get to the subject here sometime between now and 9 o'clock.
I was going to say, this isn't why I'm here, but this is working out just fine. Squirrel, tree, bright shiny object.
Eons ago, are you going to be all right? Eons ago.
Typhoid Mary.
When we were taught history, World War I, of course, was the war of the day back when we were kids in high school. And that was a history we were studying. It was kind of glossed over. It was just one of the wars we've had. And I don't recall studying it in depth. And World War II has been studied in depth by a lot of people, some of whom are true experts. So in any event, why don't we ought to introduce our guest.
Well, could I say something?
Well, wait a minute. Let me take a
I don't know.
What about it, Cince? What do you think?
Go ahead, Mom.
Jim, were you at WPRC when we had Dan Walker on as our guest when he was governor?
Oh.
You know, he was preceded by a group of people that came in with their guns drawn into WPRC out on Old 66 there in the big city of Lincoln. And I thought that was kind of overkill myself.
By the way, I watched our friend Mark McDonald interview Dan Walker just last night.
Yes, I saw that too.
Very interesting. And by the way, he's written a book, which I want to be sure and get a hold of and read, because he talks about it. And in this book, as they alluded to yesterday evening in the interview, he talks quite a bit about his experiences in prison and how profound those experiences were.
I think they're meant to be.
Well, hello.
Duh.
Another brilliant statement, right?
Well, unfortunately, he was one of the few that made a real true impact on. Okay, let's get to the business at hand.
All right.
We have an official guest here this morning.
Yes, we have.
There
yes.
she is.
Cynthia Lynn Bowns is supervisor.
Busby Bowns, that would be.
That would be for DCFS, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. And this past month was Child Abuse Prevention Month. And this month is the month that they honor all of the foster families, bless their hearts. Mm-hmm. I can remember a foster family here in Lincoln, and somebody one time saying, well, they just keep those girls for the money. Listen, if you're a foster family, and especially of a half a dozen teenage girls who are confused and troubled, it can't just be for the money.
Well,
believe me.
Just to bring that up, because that's one of the things everybody says, oh, they just foster kids because it's the money. Okay, I did bring a list. If you're having teenage girls, children 12 and over, you get a board payment of a whopping $389.
That's all?
That's what you get to feed them, and your water bill and your electric bill, and
take them to everything in your car.
Yeah, that's what you get.
I remember how it was, because I was the Busby babysitting and chauffeur service, and it takes a lot to raise a kid.
You know, if the child is 0 to 11 months, you get $366. Now, that's to buy diapers and wipes.
Formula.
You know, we waste so much money in all of the various agencies we have in the great state of Illinois. That just seems like a very low figure.
Well, it is, and that's why I always laugh when people say, well, they do it for the money. No, and you can't make money at this.
Well,
I'm sure some have.
Yeah. Since how long have you been with the Department of Children and Family Services?
I've been at DCFS for 25 years. I was 21 years as a direct service caseworker, which meant I went into the homes. I worked with families who had their children at home. I also worked with families whose children were in foster care to correct the conditions that brought the children into care so they could go home. And if we couldn't correct those conditions, then to provide permanency for the children either through guardianship or adoption.
You know, Judith, your daughter had a job that not many of us could do well. A lot of us would have our hearts on our sleeves for the most part. And that doesn't mean that those folks who work with these troubled families and troubled children don't have a deep-set emotion, but they're able to control that and set that aside as they think of more practical ways of working. So
I've always said I don't have a job, I have an adventure. It's new and it's different every day. You see a lot of things, and you just have to put it into perspective. It's kind of like we were talking earlier, servicemen and women coming back. Sometimes it's hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but we all have to do it.
Yeah. 648-5510 would be the number to call. You might have some questions of Mrs. Bowns. I take my hat off to she and all of her co-workers in that department. They're fulfilling a great need for youngsters who are really on the cusp, so to speak. Some are going to fall through the cracks.
Well, and if we talk about April, which is Child Abuse Prevention Month, Illinois is actually on the cutting edge. We are the only state that's been accredited, I think, 4 times, maybe 5, and that accreditation is good for 4 years. It's a national accreditation. I derailed. But we have investigators who are specifically trained looking for abuse and neglect. So when somebody calls the hotline and makes a report, they go out and investigate. And I have a lot of times people say, well, how do you know when to call? And well, if you're an investigator, you would know. But if you're not, if you suspect abuse or neglect, that's all it takes.
Better to err on the side of caution.
Right, because children can't protect themselves. That's why we have adults. That's why we have parents. We have what's called mandated reporters, and that's anybody who's responsible for a child. That's your daycare. That's your Sunday school teacher. That's the doctors and nurses at the hospital, at the medical group, at Springfield Clinic. Anybody who has care and control over that child is a mandated reporter.
I'm just sitting here thinking in a side issue, Judith, is all prospective parents should be screened.
Really?
Because I recall when we adopted our 2 boys, I thought I'd taken a fellow by the name of Joe Baker to live with. He was constantly camping out around, and he went around the community and he asked a lot of questions about Gene and myself. And he did a thorough job. And that's what they do for prospective adoptive parents. And it's too bad all prospective fathers can't be screened.
Well, and we do a screening process for foster parents. And it is dealing with background checks. We ask, instead of like Joe going out and interviewing people, we ask that you pick some people, and I don't know how many it is because this is foster care licensing. That's not my bailiwick. But I want to say it's like 3 or 5 reference letters, and they call those people. Because if we've removed a child from a bad situation, we want to do everything in our power not to put them in another bad situation. And we've all read the papers. Sometimes it happens. We're dealing with people. And we try our darndest to get it right, but we don't always get it right.
And unfortunately, by the very nature of the job, you're dealing with some bureaucracy too.
There's a lot of red tape, and sometimes you just gotta work smarter, not harder. You got to think outside the box. You have to, if you're always putting the child's needs first,
there you go.
You're in pretty good shape on whatever the decision is that's made.
What's the most common cause of child abuse? Is it the child himself, because they do sometimes misbehave, or is it the parent has so many issues?
I think
observation.
I think it depends. First, you look at the age of the child. My mother has said, "Oh, that's sometimes why the animals eat their young." Sometimes your teenager feels they're much brighter than you are, and you just don't get it.
Right.
And unfortunately, it becomes a physical altercation. Okay, that happens. You have a child who's special needs, who has developmental disabilities or autism, and they become difficult to deal with. You're dealing with an economy that I'm working as hard as I can and I can't make ends meet, and it becomes frustrating, and it becomes, a snowball that I don't have the money to make it, and so I'm drinking more, and you end up with substance abuse issues, you end up with domestic violence. And that's not a way to raise kids, because kids learn more by what they see than what they hear. And what I akin that to, how many times have you told the child, don't touch the stove, it's hot. It's hot, don't touch it. They have to touch the stove. And they burn their hand and they know. So you have to, as parents, Be that role model. They're going to learn by what you do. If you allow your significant other to beat on you, your child's going to think it's okay to be the victim or the perpetrator because that's what they see.
They see that.
Telling them, don't live the way mommy does. Don't do that. Ain't going to make any difference.
That's a difficult time now to take a break because that's a very deep part of our conversation, our subject matter. But we will get burned by our sponsors if we don't take a little break here. Thank you very much. And we're right back live with the studios of WLCN. The program is Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. And we have a real true personality and a lot of perspective this morning. Cynthia, Mrs. Busby's daughter, Cynthia Bowns, is a member of the Department of Children and Family Services, doing a very, very important job. And I vouchsafe to say not many of us are qualified emotionally to do that job, Judith Kay. We're proud of you, Cince. You're making an impact, a permanent impact on a lot of youngsters.
Well, your perspectives kind of change. I think back to when I started at this job 25 years ago, and I came in and I am going to save the world. I've kind of scaled that back a little bit, and I save pieces. I save pieces here and there. Yeah. Kids never want to be removed from their home regardless of what's going on, and I shouldn't say never, most of the time. To give you an idea, the Lincoln Field office covers 3 counties. It's almost 2,200 square miles. There are 73 children in Logan County who are in foster care.
73.
In the state of Illinois, there's almost 15,000 children.
That's such a sad commentary.
And some of them are just simply victims, if you please, of socioeconomic statuses, as opposed to the more direct things of absent fathers and all of that. Of course, that's a part of the socioeconomic thing.
Yeah, that is. I mean, a single income family, multiple children. You can't do it.
Well, the problem of it is, in my judgment, which is worth nothing, it's in many cases, and you see this, I'm sure, almost daily, it's a self-perpetuating thing. We have ladies who somehow don't understand how not to get pregnant, and that happens a lot of times, multiple times, with the same person, and that compounds, and so therefore it does become self-perpetuating.
It does. You deal with the families and entitlements, generational, that they don't know there's another way, that there's grants and aids out there that you can go to school, whether it be a trade school or college, that there is a better way. And you get so beaten down, why bother? Why bother?
Is emotional abuse a more insidious thing than physical abuse?
It's, in the 25 years, I know I can only remember of one case that the indicated report was emotional abuse, and removing the kids and then working with the court process. That is so hard to prove. And it's not saying that emotional abuse doesn't have lifelong effects. I mean, we've seen this in women, and men have this too, but typically women who have been battered. I've told you forever, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're lazy, you're worthless. And you hear it long enough and you are. You're stupid, you're ugly, you're lazy, and you're worthless, so why bother? And it's breaking that cycle, which is a horrible cycle to break. You're dealing with typically the woman that this is the only thing she's ever known. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to support my children? When you're dealing with substance abuse, we have drugs that are so addicting and so cheap. You can't be all messed up and chase your 2-year-old. It just doesn't work real well. Mm-hmm. But then having them try to find their sobriety is virtually impossible because of the addictive nature of things like crack and meth that you can cook in your basement. Mm. I don't recommend that, by the way.
Yeah,
no, not so much.
Go
but
ahead.
some of these children then ultimately find themselves in foster care. And with the statistics you've addressed here, how do you ever find enough foster homes for these people?
There's never enough good foster homes. You get into a quality and quantity. I believe that in our 3 counties we have 11 homes.
Say
now,
that again,
reiterate
please.
the number of children
In a tri-county, or you have
3?
In the 3 counties, I think we have 11 homes.
That's not many.
And we're always needing foster homes. And it's very easy. All you have to do is call the local office at 735-4402 and ask for Linda. She's foster care licensing, and she can get the process started. You have to go into it not for the money, as we talked earlier, because it ain't going to work real well for you.
No.
But to make a difference. It's a calling. I've told my foster parents that I work with, I wouldn't do their job for anything. Of course, they've said they wouldn't do mine either.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's
Well, you're
right.
even then.
But I bring you this child who has had so much trauma, and I ask you to love this child and care for this child as if it's your own. Mm-hmm. Well, I work to get it back to the situation I removed the child from. And I don't know, as a foster parent, if I could let go.
I happen to have a little personal observation about that, if I may be permitted that, Judith. Greg, our son Greg and his wife have been foster parents. When he was down at Tams, Illinois, and the administration down there at the prison, they had 2 youngsters, and they really wanted to adopt them. And the state of Illinois, for whatever reason, sent them back to their birth parents. And unfortunately found out that didn't work out very well. They were druggies. But they later became foster parents of 3 siblings. And they adopted them. And I just want to make a personal observation, if I may. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she put on Facebook, if you please, that she'd been a Gossett all of her life. And then she hastened to say that she had just existed before she came into Greg and Bobby's family. And I thought that really bothered me.
And that's
it got to me.
Well, and that's a child that has embraced it. And I've worked with lots of children like that, and it's been fun. You know, I think about one of them, that our first meeting was, she was in a foster home, and she needed to be moved because of some of the dynamics that had happened between the foster parents. Foster mom was hospitalized. They did teenage girls, and we didn't think foster dad should be alone in the house with a bunch of teenage girls for his own safety. And I went into the home to remove this child, to place her in another foster home, and she locked herself in the bathroom. And I let her know that I was going to wait her out. I had nowhere to be at any particular time. She did finally come out, placed her in a foster home. She was subsequently adopted. She graduated. They changed the rules at high school after she graduated because she was a junior and valedictorian, and the seniors were very unhappy with that because they had worked very hard for 4 years. It only took her 3. She went on to college, met a lovely, lovely young man, got married, and has a beautiful little girl. So
doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't get any better than that.
You can't write that script any better.
And, you know, those are the stories that keep all of us going. Mm-hmm. The stories like your granddaughter, that I wasn't a Gossett. I've been a Gossett my whole life.
Yeah.
And
when in fact,
it happens.
I think she was 8 when she was adopted. So.
But those are the stories that don't make the paper because they're not fun.
Yeah, well.
You know, you want to read about the heinous things that happened in the foster home, that a child, you know, did this and nobody was watching. Those are what make the paper. It's not the good ones. It's, you know, I think back to another child many years ago who called me all excited. She got Student of the Week, and I reveled with her. And when we hung up, I thought, how sad. I'm it. I'm what she has. And I have seen her. She's a wonderful young lady now. She's no longer in the system. She's got her own place. She's got a job. She graduated high school. Life is good.
You know, as articulate as you are and as passionate as you are about your job, it occurs to me that you could write a pretty good book without getting into personals and names and so forth. The experiences generically. You ought to think about that, Cince.
In my spare time. Between church and Habitat and work.
After you get retired.
I already got retarded. And it's a calling. It's a calling.
You know, I think it has to be. As I said earlier on, I don't think Judith and Jim and I could do that because our hearts are on our sleeves for the most part.
Well, it's kind of like I've always said I probably could never work at the Humane Society because I'd have to move to the country. I would have all these dogs and cats.
Yeah.
There are a few children that I've thought about bringing home. Haven't. You know, it's just like I say, making a difference one life at a time.
One of your jobs that you have now is to work on this foster parents' Bill of Rights. I'm sure that
I was voluntold.
You were voluntold, yes.
That is a federal document, actually, that is updated annually that talks about the rights and responsibilities of foster parents. You know, because rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. So it kind of lays out the expectations, the grievance process, and how it's really supposed to work. And as a foster parent, you go through what's called PRIDE training. I don't know if it's an acronym or not. Again, we're into licensing, which I'm not good at. But it's many weeks course, and it talks about children of trauma. It talks about the court process. It talks about the relationship you should have with your caseworker. This is a team. This isn't a dictatorship. This is a team approach. You live with my kid 24/7. I need you. You have information that I will never have on this child. I don't know that they're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning with night terrors. You know that. You're with them. And that's why it's a partnership and it's working together. It's not, you're the glorified babysitter and I'm giving you $350 a month. Just do your job.
Yeah, no.
It is so much more than that because our kids have seen things, heard things that we can't even fathom.
The responsibilities of folks in your job are just really enormous. Do you have a burnout factor in your profession?
They've actually done studies as a caseworker that about 6 years is what you can do this, and then you need to try something else. So I figure I'm like 4.5 into it.
Yeah.
Is there a retirement age that's mandatory for folks in your category?
I don't think there's a mandatory retirement age. We all shoot for what's called the Rule of 85, which is your age plus your years of service. Add up to 85, you can walk. But this is also...
Your age plus the years of service at your job.
Right. Which means November of next year, I can walk.
My goodness. You're just a kid.
All in comparison, Bill.
You're starting to say something.
I was going to go back to the foster parent business. How many children can a foster parent house, or would that be an individual thing?
Both. And I don't know what it is. There's square footage. If you have one child, you need X number of square feet in that bedroom.
Heck, figured that out.
And if you add a second child, it's this much more square footage. Huh. But it may be that, and you can limit it. I only want boys or I only want girls. I only want teenagers or I only want babies. I mean, you can be very specific in what you want as a foster parent. And you may get called at 2 in the morning.
Right.
For those who've been around for a while, Laverne Landers and
yes.
Terry were foster parents for 8,000 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
They got a lot. In fact, one of the last times I placed a child there, I called her at 2 in the morning and I said, we found this teenager. She'd been on run. Are you willing to take her? Yep. So took her over to Laverne's. Really? And Laverne called me at about 7 o'clock in the morning and said, oh, and by the way, she left, I think it was about 5 a.m. Huh. She went down the TV antenna. Okay, thank you.
Mine used to come up the TV antenna. What chance, some of these foster parents just find that they can't hardly part with the child. What's the chance of getting to adopt a child? Because I know you've had it happen.
Yeah, it does happen. Again, one of the big things as a foster parent is you have to work with us on visitation with the biological parents. Mm-hmm. You have to support the permanency goal. Typically, permanency goals start out at return home. That's what we're shooting for. Foster parents are there to provide love and supervision, but work with us to get the child home to their biological parents. It doesn't always work, because if you're dealing with a substance abuse issue, if you're dealing with domestic violence, sometimes parents just can't. And then, the child can be freed for adoption, and the foster parents obviously would get first choice. We have foster parents that have had children for a couple years. We don't want to adopt, so they help work with us on making a smooth transition to an adoptive home for this child. So not all foster parents are in this for adoption. They're in this to make a difference and help the children.
Also, the business of going back home, that's actually like a rule, isn't it? That this will be the goal in every case. We're trying to fix it.
Well, we work with the parents to correct the conditions that brought the kids into care. Not all cases start with a return home goal. It depends on the circumstance on how you got in to the case.
I'm sure that there have been perhaps many instances where you go into a situation and you just think to yourself, hey, this is just impossible. These kids can't stay in this house. And you make a kind of a judgment, but what that has to be adjudicated later on down the road as time goes by. But I'm sure that you said to yourself and your fellow workers, Lord, these kids can't stay here.
Oh, absolutely. We have what's called minimum parenting standards. And not all people can be as wonderful as my mother was raising us.
You get pimples when you lie.
Basically, what a parent has to offer is food, clothing, shelter. This doesn't mean I have to ask you how your day went at school and what did you have for lunch. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean I have to enroll you in soccer. Mm-hmm. It means 3 hots and a cot. And again, age-appropriate supervision, obviously. Don't give the 2-year-old a screwdriver.
Well, the youth are so innocent, and for that matter, I'm sure they remain, up to a certain point, innocent for a long time. And they're in circumstances about which they have no control, nor, more importantly, any understanding.
Right, and unfortunately, when you're looking at a case where you're going to take protective custody because the abuse and or neglect are so heinous, you can't leave the children in the home. There isn't any time to do some really good preparation work. I think we've gotten a lot better on that, in 25 years. It used to be we'd just snatch you up and put you in another foster home. We've now started with, you're going to go to the Gossetts. It's just a mom and dad, and they have a dog, and they have a fenced-in backyard, and kind of give them an idea of where they're going, rather than just saying, you're going to the Gossetts.
Yeah. Prepare them a little bit.
Because it's scary. I don't care what age you are. It's got to be scary to say, get in my car.
Yeah. Well, the scary thing is that we ran out of time already. Doggone it. Our guest this morning has been Judy's daughter, Cince Busby Bowns. We appreciate, since number one, you're taking your time out of your very busy career, and we also appreciate the job you're doing. As you know, I always try to find some quote that has certainly some relevance or pertains to the subject matter. And unfortunately, this has... a lot of fathers are simply not in the picture and never will be. But the quote I have, I read this, I had to search around a little bit last night, Judith K. The most important thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. Doesn't get any more basic than that. Thank you very much, Cince.
Thank you.